I think there is amazing news as of right now when it comes to Zebec. And what is that? Not too long ago, Zebec made a post on X and it said that Zebec is bringing its payment technology to the Algorand ecosystem with the integration of Algo, which is Algorand's native token, across our card and payroll tools. Now, why is this a big deal in my opinion? It's because if we take a look at Algorand, it's a very popular layer 1 blockchain. Allegedly, it is the technology of choice for over 2,000 global organizations. Algorand, not to mention, is allegedly carbon neutral. I'm very bullish on Algorand. And also, let's not forget, when it comes to Algorand, it has an aspect of something called ISO 20022. And I think that right there is kind of what sets this whole thing off. Because if we take a look at Zebec, by acquiring GateKnox, right, they're focused on compliance. However, the founder of GateKnox is now working towards ISO 20022 compliance when it comes to Zebec. Now, why is this a big deal? Because if we take a look at ISO 20022, that is currently being used by many financial institutions from all around the world for something called inter-organizational data exchange. So yeah, that matters. Other projects out there that have an aspect of that is like, for instance, Ripple, Stellar, of course, Algorand, like I mentioned before. Zebec being a project that's focused on payments, global trade and finance, it would only make sense that they are working towards that compliance, right? But again, for a project that is working towards something like that, having quite essentially this sort of, news regarding Algorand, which is, again, something that has that ISO 20022 aspect to it, I think is, at the end of the day, something hypothetically good when it comes to Zebec. Not to mention, Algorand, it has a lot of fans. The community is amazing. Algo, its native token listed in a bunch of major exchanges. So I think this could also, in a sense, kind of give Zebec more popularity and also more awareness because, a lot of people that I know that believe in Algorand, they don't really think about Zebec. Now, I'm in this, I would say situation where I believe in Algorand and also I believe in Zebec, but then some of my friends out there who believe in Algorand, they don't really know much about Zebec, right? So then I think this is maybe a good thing in terms of maybe giving that exposure to something like Zebec. Not to mention, when I take a look at something like Zebec, people like to say, oh man, it's kind of boring. They're not really doing much and all this. Who cares about the Zebec cards? Well, I think it's pretty interesting nonetheless, in my opinion, when it comes to Zebec cards, because even though it's nothing necessarily that revolutionary or like anything really that new in the grand scheme of things, I like the partnerships that they're having. I mean, let's just think about this. I mean, a lot of other projects out there that have cards, some of them that I see, they're not really caring about it anymore. It seems like they forgot about it or they just don't want to have any more partnerships. But when it comes to Zebec, it feels like they're actually treating it seriously, right? It doesn't feel like it's being treated as hey, we have this other aspect to our project, and that's about it. It doesn't feel like that to me. Not to mention, when it comes to Zebec, it's focused on payrolls, right? If we take a look at payrolls, I think an argument that Zebec could have in terms of playing a role in that is, for instance, quite essentially instant payrolls, in a sense where if we take a look at payrolls, like traditionally speaking, like for instance, if let's say, I was working a part-time job or whatever, or I was just working just a regular job, it takes time to get paid in some cases, right? Like for instance, back in college, I was working a part-time job, had to wait like 2 weeks. But then through like, let's say instant payrolls, I might not have to wait 2 weeks, right? It could hypothetically just be for the day I work and then I get it then, in theory, allegedly. But I'm just saying, isn't that kind of revolutionary? Now, not every single person may want that, and not every single enterprise may want to kind of believe in something like that, in my opinion. But then having that kind of option, I still think is pretty interesting nonetheless. And I like how Zebec is at least focused on payrolls because let's face it, it is a market that I think is very interesting and also sometimes overlooked because people usually think about, blockchain gaming, decentralized finance. So yeah, I just think that this is something that is pretty unique, and I think it's kind of awesome seeing Zebec focus on that. Now, another hype market that people usually care about is AI, right? And Zebec, it's actually focused on that in a sense, in my opinion. It's focused on AI-based PayFi, so AI-based payment finance. Why do I think it's a big deal? It's because, again, there's a lot of hype for AI, payments, global trade and finance, projects like Ripple and Stellar, they're heavily focused on that. So kind of quite essentially combining those aspects, I think is pretty interesting to me. Now let's say ZBCN went to the price of 10 cents. Considering current circulating supply and market cap at that point is around $9 billion, I get it. It's around a 27x from here. Not too long ago, when I was talking about ZBCN, like it was around like an 11 or 13x at one point. But then now, it's around a 27x. But not to mention, not too long ago, it was slightly over 30x. So the price has done pretty okay as of late in terms of the recovery. Not as like much as some other projects that I see out there. But then in my opinion, the way I view it is that ZBCN, if I saw what it did back then, it kind of like had a delayed sort of rally, in my opinion, because take a look at something like, for instance, XPR or like, XCN or XDC, which I think arguably are the competitors when it comes to ZBCN. They kind of had their sort of rise to attention a little bit first, right? ZBCN was kind of a little bit late when it comes to that. It still had a rally though. Now, though, of course, there's a big pullback, but I'm just saying, it felt like the attention was a little bit delayed. So, in my opinion, sure, maybe ZBCN may not be recovering as well as some other altcoins out there, but from what I've seen, historically speaking, ZBCN tends to move a little bit late. Now, it may be different moving forward, who knows? But I'm still staying patient because I stayed patient when it comes to ZBCN back then, which arguably I think was a lot harder because back then when it comes to ZBCN, there was really no kind of proof, at least in the short to medium term at that time, to kind of say, hey, ZBCN did this recently. There was really none of that, right? So then it was harder for me to believe in ZBCN then, but then I still believed in it anyways. So now that ZBCN at least had that confirmation despite the pullback, I'll still want to believe in it right now because why wouldn't I if, let's say, it was actually doing better than before? This is my mentality. But even besides all that, a $9 billion market cap, that's like not even 10% of XRP's current market cap. And many people would arguably say that we're nowhere like, nearing the peak of a fully fledged type of altcoin season. So then, in my opinion, all I have to do is really just stay patient. That's the way to take a look at it. I'm not telling anyone to do anything when it comes to ZBCN, but I'm just dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting. That's it. Because for me, it's just about consistency over a period of time. It's not like, hey, when is the moment that I could just randomly go all in? That's not my style. I am not a day trader. I don't use leverage. That's not what I do. Personally, for me, again, I just take a look at a project. I take a look at the fundamentals. And if I like it, I'll dollar cost average and just wait. That's pretty much about it. But when it comes to Zebec, again, nonetheless, when I take a look at the stuff that it has going on with Algorand, we have to think about Algorand is so massive, right? I don't think they really need Zebec, you know what I mean? But then it also could be argued that something like Circle, which is the creator of USDC, I think arguably they also don't need Zebec, right? But then still, Circle is allegedly one of the early backers when it comes to Zebec, and also allegedly they do hold a significant amount of ZBCN. So just think about that. A lot of these sort of big projects, right, that don't need Zebec for whatever reason still seem to want to kind of, somewhat, I think, pay attention to something like Zebec, which I find very interesting. Not to mention something like, for instance, Solana Ventures, right? Do they need Zebec? No, I don't think so. But then still, Solana Ventures allegedly also one of the backers when it comes to Zebec. So I think this is sort of a pattern in a sense where a lot of these, again, big entities that don't need Zebec, I see them sometimes still want to kind of, believe in it. So then I find this very fascinating. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I would greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch you all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.